what I would like everybody to do, just starting at the end and coming towards me, is just quickly introduce themselves, who they are, where they work, and after that, I'm going to pose the first question. Start with Chris.
Hey, Tony. Chris Gates, I'm assuming it's on. Chris Gates, and I'm with Allstate.
Rhonda Vetere, Herbalife.
Richard Entrup, most recently with Verizon Business Group.
And I'm Scott Hofmann. I'm here with Globant.
Wonderful. Thank you all for that. We've got a nice mix of kind of consultants, operators, etc. What I want to do is if you look at the title, Cutting Edge Technologies and Partnerships. So what I want to do is start with Chris.
I know, man.
And I want him to talk a little bit about what he's doing at Allstate to make sure that there's the right level of digital engagement, business acumen at the senior executive team, and then how that filtered down into the organization, and you developed products and services to meet the business need. And if I could ask the people at the back to please focus on the front and take a seat. Thank you so much.
No, Tony, thank you very much and I'm excited to be on the panel today. The question about how, the business acumen.
Was this a board meeting?
It looks like it is.
What's going on here?
You got all
Turn off Hunter Miller's mic, please.
Yeah, I think Hunter's in the men's room.
Turn off Hunter Miller's mic.
So Hunter, I'm Nora.
Hi, Nora. Nice to meet you.
We met a couple years ago.
Yeah.
You have to turn off Hunter Miller's mic. Because heaven forbid, the guy's going to go to the bathroom any minute. And then it's going to get really embarrassing. Okay. There you go. That was all the problems.
All right. This one's
Chris,
still on there, right?
Back over to you.
So the question is around business acumen and how do you drive change using technology? And I was really intrigued by the comment this morning around the article in the Wall Street Journal, which I have not read yet, but I absolutely will read it because I think it plays into kind of our approach around what we're dealing with. What we saw and what we see in a lot of businesses is the heritage structure that an organization has around how they run their supply chain, how they run their financials, or how they run the different elements of their business. I could see how someone writing an article like that would devalue the impact of an IT organization because it is devalued when you are siloing it in or you're decentralizing it. Our attempt was to unlock the value of IT. You really had to take more of a process view, not only of technology, but how the organization makes decisions, how they fund initiatives, and how they drive change within the enterprise. In order to try to get the organization to the same place of thinking that we were at, we launched a special series called our TQ series. And we've all grown up, you all are familiar with IQ, and then the EQ, the softer side of what we do, and how that makes ideas better. TQ is really a technology acumen. And it's a curated set of topics that we felt were important to really educate our business partners on, to raise the level of the conversation that they would have. Because we may know a lot about a particular technology set, but we don't necessarily know everything about the business problem that they're trying to solve and how technology may be able to help them. So creating a curated set of content like this, embedding it into their goals and objectives where they have an obligation to go through and complete this basically 72 hours worth of learning over a period of time. It raised the vernacular of how they understand technology, and it brought a lot more creativity when we would bring these folks together in a different construct, right? We're not bringing them together in their functions anymore. We're bringing them together in more of a process, and we're using the knowledge that they gain through TQ to have a much more intelligent conversation around what the art of the possible could look like.
And then what product, when you and I were talking, there was a kind of a voice-to-text AI product that helps claims processing. Tell us a little bit about that thing, because this is really, how do you use technologies to create some kind of find and keep customers aspect to the business, and then, most importantly, did you have a partner to help you do that?
So if you imagine the project we're talking about here is just something as simple as a voice-to-text transcription. And as you can imagine, this shows up on my desk coming from a call center representative that wants to be able to capture a conversation for posterity's sake and be able to forward it on to a more senior person if they want to go back and look at it. On the surface, it's absolutely a horrible idea. And the fact that she articulated it so well allowed me to kill it quickly and save us all a bunch of time. However, when we actually took a step back and we got more people involved in the process and we understood that the problem she's solving was not necessarily voice-to-text transcription, it was trying to change the end-user experience in their most critical time of need in my business. When you have an accident, if my daughter who's going to college has an accident and she's calling in to report a claim, that's a very stressful period of time for her. That is a voice conversation that comes into our call centers that we are able to now transcribe real time as she is talking. And this conversation would typically happen 6 different times during the adjudication of a claim in our business and other businesses like ours. So you can imagine, that customer gets irritated pretty quickly after having to repeat themselves. The transcription service not only allowed us to transcribe it for posterity's sake, it created a data set that we were able to do real-time AI and ML on. So as we're live streaming this conversation, we can prep the agent who's on the other side of the phone with more intelligent questions, clarifying questions, more detail that we would like out of this. If there's an address given like 41st and 7th, I can dynamically pull in a geospatial satellite photo of that area so the agent can now picture where this accident happened and put themselves in the mindset of my daughter and ask better questions around how to do this. That entire process allowed this 21-day end-to-end cycle time to be within 7 minutes from the time the conversation starts to end the first time, and we're typically able to adjudicate within 24 hours and get them back up and running on what they're able to do. Tony, this would not have happened if we were treating it as we did before and we were doing it in silos the way we were. We would not have understood the impact of the technology, the pieces around voice to text and the AI and ML and the geospatial tagging you can put on there. None of those components would have come together the way that they did without raising the acumen and getting people together to have a different conversation than they would historically.
Brilliant. Richard, you're next. Verizon, the technology's there, 5G, endpoint. Tell us a little bit about how those technologies were used to kind of improve business outcomes, profitability, and all the rest, and whether you needed any partnerships to help you be effective in that area.
Sure. So I guess unique to my position because Verizon is a vendor and we're the partner of our clients, right? Every Fortune 500 company, 100% of them are Verizon clients on the enterprise side. So, my role was more about evangelism and being a product and brand ambassador for 5G and edge computing specifically. So I spent most of my time exploring what the art of the possible was around these technologies, whether it was manufacturing or retail or any industry, pick one, and we would go in and try to conduct workshops to identify how they could leverage this technology in order to meet business objectives, be it retention or conversion or engagement or just actually revenue opportunities.
Can you give us one example of, I'm sure there is, but are you allowed to give us an example of where you went in and what the ROI business outcome was through the introduction of 5G? And you don't have to mention the particular name of a customer, but
that's fine.
Give us a real example.
In full disclosure, there's been one public use case, a port in the UK that is leveraging private networking. This is 5G. They've got their own core network within their facility, and they have gained tremendous operating efficiencies in the container supply chain of that port. That's one use case. There are many others that are still in pilot phases. Everything from using AI for colonoscopies and identifying things or through surgery. There are AR, VR overlay applications that are actually helping brain surgeons before the actual initial cut, determined based on previous CAT scans and MRIs, where to go in first. So these technologies exist, and they're working on Wi-Fi and GSM today. 5G allows them to just work that much better because it's high bandwidth and low latency, and the edge computing also gets you to zero latency. So when you get a 4 gigabit per second connection wirelessly on a phone or a surgical piece of equipment or an IoT sensor, magic things can happen from that, and it's really truly the art of the possible.
Great. Rhonda, AI, ML in your world, How did you use that? I know you put a chief data officer in place. So tell me, what is the thinking behind that? And what was that person targeted to do? And how did he go about doing that?
Yes, very important. Customer data retention. We actually focused on getting that metric for data retention. How long is our customer, consumer, distributor, how long are they in their journey? What are they buying? We needed a data mine. Very, very important to understand those metrics so we can actually do more with that data. Very important, Tony.
Scott, switching to you now, a slightly different angle. So what people who are CIOs in organizations are trying to introduce new cool technologies into businesses, which is about kind of creating momentum for change. And while the CIO may be all a big cheerleader and wanting to do this, bringing new technologies in is not a trivial task. So tell us what you've kind of learned at Globant about how do you do that in an organization? How do you facilitate that kind of change and transformation?
Yeah, sure. At Globant and personally, I've been in professional services my whole life.
Yep.
So we're brought in to augment a team and help them drive into a new area, a new focus. We have lots of studios, lots of capabilities. You've heard about some today. I'm clearly not going to tell you how great 5G is. Someone else can do that for me, or any of these other technologies. But when we come in, what we typically find are companies have created an innovation group, an office, a team of people, and they've sequestered them somewhere to come up with some genius. And a lot of times it fails. And if you look at digital transformation, the focus on digital transformation right now, a lot of it's focused on business plus technology. But what's missing a lot of times is the cultural aspect of it. If an organization is focused on taking a team and trying to extract the best from that team and call that innovation, they're probably missing out on the entire rest of the organization who has innovative ideas in and of themselves. So to us, a lot of the challenge and the strategy that we try to bring to other organizations is exactly that. How do I actually innovate? How do I do incremental change, true innovation, or even invention with what I have now? There was just an article, I'm sure everybody read about it, about Vetere.com, and the CEO fired 900 people yesterday, or maybe 2 days ago on a Zoom call. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, well, the statistics, the AI said that these people were working 2 hours a day. But the reality is, were they engaged properly? Did you have any systems in place to extract what they thought they should be doing, what they could be doing, and where that could drive that organization in the future? And without that piece, I think that a lot of these technologies, even 5G, when we think about the applications of 5G, we can list a bunch of things, but then getting to actually use them is a whole different strategy, and one that takes cultural change. And that's where we try to focus.
So talking about introducing innovation, cultural change, incubators, sometimes outsourcing innovation. Starting with you, Chris, tell me a little bit about how you drove innovation in, and whether you had a separate skunk group, whether you involved other people in the organization, whether you had those kind of innovation centers, incubators. So talk about that. And then, so the rest of you can prepare. I'm going to ask you all that question, and then I'm going to ask you to tell me about a big fat fail. Because I want everybody to hear about where you try to do this stuff and where it was a complete disaster, because I want the lesson of disaster to come. So tell me about where you did well and how you made it, and then put in the back of your mind the fail one, because that's the next question after the success one.
Gotcha. So I was fortunate. I came into an organization where my predecessor had established a network of 9 laboratories around the world. So it was a laboratory that's set up with people, process, and technology. We partnered with some of the best technology firms that teach methodologies, that have technologies that are a platform, so we could obfuscate a lot of the details from the developers and allow them to get to hello world very quickly. And we used it as an incubator to bring new ideas into it. But it was about 20% of our population, so it was a pretty big commitment for us to be able to do this globally. And it was a concept of bringing ideas in. You have 6 weeks to prove a prototype. Once you got to the 6-week mark, you had the opportunity to get 6 months to get to product.
Who are you talking about? So like just any random person say, I've got an idea. How did you filter up those ideas? Where did they come from?
So early on, we were force fitting it a little bit, and this will get into where it didn't work. I'll tell you more about that later. But we were using our traditional planning processes that we all go through annually to look at where we were going to go next year. And we thought it was a more efficient way of dispositioning bad ideas. Bring an idea in, give it 6 weeks, let's vet it out. If it works, let it go. If it doesn't work, pull the funding and let another idea come into it. So it wasn't as organic as you would expect. It was a little bit more orchestrated, and we were taking a legacy process and forcing it into kind of a different way of delivering.
Very good. Rhonda and Richard, any comment on that and how you guys approached it?
Sure, there you go. Okay. I think my philosophy on innovation and acceleration, as you called it, is what I ran at Verizon. I think it's critical that you keep it separate. I don't think large Fortune 15 companies innovate very well because they're just stuck in their way. And if any Clay Christensen fans out there who have read or took the course on disruptive innovation we've learned is that you need to keep them separate for sure. So with that said, I think organizations need to have formal innovation acceleration functions and venture groups that are constantly keeping their finger on the pulse of the startup community to identify those technologies that can help shape their existing core base of products. And that's a whole separate group with...
Yeah, but so you've got the cool job and the other 75% of the schmucks have got bad jobs. So how do you deal with that? Because like you've now got the cool jobs and everything's changing and I want to work there, I don't want to work over here. How do you motivate that 85% of people in the company who are doing the boring old stuff?
Not my job to do that. IT is honestly, we talked about CIO and CDO. I think Nick said it best. The CIO is really data center, ERP, corporate systems. The chief digital officer tends to have those new leveraging emerging technologies for growing new revenue streams. That's what this is all about. So it's not the incubator's job, the innovation team's job to keep the IT folks engaged.
And if I can add to that too, so we talk about that a lot, right? Well, now you've got this elite group, and then everyone else is jealous of that elite group. But I would pose it the other way to say, have you, as a leader in an organization, asked the people what they like to do, how they like to work, what they're interested in actually doing, as opposed to telling them? And it's that whole, what Covey was saying earlier, right? It's not command and control anymore. And within Globant and externally as we push too, we talk about energy and empathy and trust from a leadership perspective. So, not everyone does want to necessarily go and do the 6-week rapid, no time to think about it, throw ideas at the wall and go at it. Some people are analytical people who want to talk about a long-term challenge, the invention challenge. So there's incremental improvements. These are things that quarter over quarter we need to do because the market's judging us. There's innovative things which maybe are 6-month, 1-year horizons. We're making more of a jump. And then there's an invention aspect, which is much more of a leap, where you need to be able to lose money to gain knowledge and eventually increase probability of the next success. And if you understand who's in your organization that fits into those molds and enjoys those different molds, then you can be highly successful.
Right. Rhonda?
Yes, I'm going to use Estee Lauder as an example because we created innovation hubs there. And actually, I had pulled out money, 8% of the budget, and carved out a team. And that created at first, oh my gosh, that person's working on that, but the slick and shiny object, no. How do you work with the lines of businesses, which were the various brands, whether it was La Mer or Clinique, Bobbi Brown, to enable them and innovate and show progress on whether it was traffic counting, whether it was the latest and greatest beacon technology back then. So it was actually carved out, Tony, and it was a change of a mental model shift within IT, and then building out innovation hubs around the country. I think that's a great example, and we'll talk about fail later.
Okay, fail. Come on, Chris, give us a big fat failure and why.
Well, and now I'm going to stand out like a sore thumb because I hold a different opinion than some of the others on the panel now. based on the failures
I love
that we
difference
have,
in
right?
MVP. Go for it.
So we do still have a very small niche innovation that we would be working with people like Nick and the work that the great work they're doing with Harman Kardon and how they're revolutionizing the cabin and autonomous cars, and we play a big role in that. And there's an innovation group that does that, but it's a very small percentage. Where I think we made the mistake is we did create an us versus them culture. In creating a separate innovation center, we took 18% of our population and we gave them breakfast, we gave them lunch, we gave them different shirts. I mean, it was like you were walking into a Circus Olay office. It was so much fun to be there, which was fantastic. We completely pissed off everybody else in the process, right? Whether you wanted
So
to...
you were the guy who's responsible for the great resignation, the great... That was you?
No,
Okay.
no, that was my predecessor. So what we are trying to do, and we'll see, a year from now, we'll see if this works out, because I do have a different opinion now. I felt the goodness we were getting out of that cycle created three personas. You have to have a design studio, you have to have flawless execution, and you have to have operations, right? So we create an organization vitality model that allows people to kind of go in, and we force rotations. You can opt out, you don't have to do it, but we make it available to everybody. So if you want to do a rotation and you're in the operations world and you want to go spend 6 months in the innovation center, go do it. You can do it because the methodology we have is consistent in all 9 labs. The tools we use are the same. Fungibility of resources becomes a lot more accessible to us. And you go in, and when you develop a product, you think differently about what you're doing. And then you may transition after that 6 weeks back into something else. You may take that product with you into a longer cycle, actually engineering thing. And I don't know if we've solved it yet. We have an aspiration that if we can unlock this and we can get everybody focusing like Circus Olay, what a great, amazing place that would be for a company that's almost 100 years old, and break down some of the barriers that have us operating in a certain way. But we haven't solved it yet. So I have an opinion, and I hope that it plays out the way I think it will.
Great. Rhonda, what about your failure?
This might not come as a surprise, but going so fast, technology, we like to innovate, create, get it out there, return on investment. And sometimes, you need to bring people even more along the journey, even though it might take another year, which a year in our world is 20 to 30. So as someone who likes to do something in speed, having a team say throttle back, it's kind of hard, Tony. And that's something that we recognized early on. And I think as technologists, we all need to talk about that more.
Okay. Richard?
Yeah. So Chris touched on something. You said you're a 100-year-old company. So prior to Verizon, I was at a 250-year-old company called Christie's, and trying to drive innovation, digital transformation there was a bit of a challenge. We did some really cool stuff with AI and machine learning and predictive analytics around the art pricing. We did some AR, VR, and virtual hanging of the paintings on your wall. We did the first blockchain-based auction. So lots of digital, technically things that would fall into digital transformation for sure. Brought in new clients that would not have otherwise even dealt with Christie's, so it was a success. The failure on the pricing of the art was a result of the in-house specialists who their primary remit was to price art. And here we are having AI machine learning Bayesian models doing better than they did on the ranges of what to set the prices of the art at, and then actually what the art sold for. And that was a big threat. I would imagine the real estate industry, the stock market, eventually all of these.
We saw Zillow come unstuck recently.
Exactly, same model there where you've got automation and technology and data outpacing the accuracy and predictability of humans. And that's a challenge you have to manage in order to be successful. It wasn't a total failure. We were still using the apps to price things, but it was a conflict, let's say.
Scott, where have you seen failures? What's the warning here?
Well, personally, I've had the great privilege of being an advisor to many different startups, not even in my professional career within professional services, but just as an individual. And the thing that I fell into, and I know that others have probably in this room, and it's changing now with sort of a digital trend, is to think way too inside out, significantly too inside out. We have a group of experts, we know what the next thing is, we're gonna go smash this thing out of the park, and not getting deep enough into that outside-in thought process. The exact example is we built an incredible automated marketing platform. I mean, this thing will crush almost anything in the market today. However, it was targeted to small, medium-sized businesses, like mom and pop businesses. And we realized they have no experience in marketing whatsoever. They don't even know the terminology that we put inside of the tool. It would be amazing to a marketer, but not to somebody who owns a pizza shop. And I mean, this is many years ago, but now the trend, obviously, with digital transformation, with design-oriented thinking, is of course an outside-in philosophy. But I still think that many organizations will do the bare minimum of primary and secondary research, and then go run really hard for 6 months and then test a little bit too late. So, a lesson there was, test early often. I'm not a big fan of the fail fast as much as the learn fast sort of mode of that piece.
So we know that Chris Gates started the whole Great Resignation. So we know that. But let's actually understand if there's any impact on this us and them, cool kind of work, cool environment, work from home. I saw something so good the other day. I think it was Satya Nadella who talked about strong ties and weak ties. I don't know if anybody ever heard him talk about that. But in this world now, strong ties are ties you form with people you talk to a lot. So your little team that you Zoom with every other day, I find that, this whole kind of pandemic has brought me closer to people on my team who I talk to, but other partners in other offices that I saw every now and then, like I hardly know them anymore. And so I think that's part of the driver, and perhaps there's a little clue, and I want to understand from all of you, is something about new technologies, innovation, is that a problem? Is that what's driving some of this? And if you don't create these hubs where you can find those people who have a big desire to work differently, work from home, have a different environment, that you're going to lose those people? Is there a clue to that, Great Resignation in some of what we're talking about now?
Yeah, I'm not sure in my context whether the labs contribute or not. I think it's a draw for us when we're bringing talent in, the people that want to work that way. What I would say, and I love your question, what are your clues? Where's your antenna? We are launching an effort. We've been working on it for 9 months. We call it Digital Connections Driving Company Culture. Because the period of time where you could walk into an office and see if somebody's having a bad day are over. You just don't see that. I can't bump into you at Starbucks and say, hey, I haven't seen you in 3 weeks. How's it going? Or I can't razz you about the Alabama game or whatever. Those are kind of micro moments that kind of create a relationship, and you can't do that as much when you're remote. You've got to understand what are the drivers of your business's culture, and how do you replicate those in some digital fashion to create those same type of micro moments? And then bring what I call a radically human approach to it. Be very empathetic, because the situation we ran into where we failed was I don't think we were listening. We didn't hear the screams coming from people who weren't part of the cool class, right? The people who made us who we were blocking them out. So we weren't listening. So I think to get clues, to get evidence, it starts with being empathetic and listening and just trying to navigate this next period of time, because it is a lot of change going on in all of our organizations.
Rhonda?
I would say a clue is every time I hear, when we get back to the office, I lean forward on Zoom and say, we're not going back to the old way of thinking. Let's innovate, and we need to be thinking more innovative and creative, because if you have that old mindset, you're not going to be able to innovate your team and think differently and think agile. And I think, Tony, that's been a big, big clue. We're not going to just automatically wake up and we're going to have to be able 30,000 people in an event. And thank goodness we have this one, Hunter and Tony. But we have to be really realistic. When you hear that, my antenna goes up immediately on decisions and old-time way of traditional thinking within the IT world.
Richard?
So I go back, I guess, early 90s when there was IT and there was this thing called the Internet Group, and they were called the Interactive Group, and they were very separate. And that was by design because they were not traditional IT data center people. They were just people that were very much in touch with emerging technologies. And I think this goes back to this concept we've been talking about here today. But I think you need, as a senior IT leader, to just tap the best of your resources across your organization, whether it's IT, apps, infrastructure, process, whatever the group is, you want to identify those best resources and develop them. This whole cool kid notion versus not, as if the IT stuff's not cool, that's always going to exist. But the fact of the matter is, the entire IT organization is there for a reason, and that is to grow the business, not to keep them happy or challenged or anything. I mean, so I think, and the pace expectations of deliverables as it relates to revenue and competitive advantage and engagement and conversion and retention are very intense, and some people may not make it. So I think as an IT leader, you need to manage both sides and try to get the best out of your resources as best you can.
Scott, I leave the closing comments to you. Do you want to wrap us up and round us out?
Sure. There's an old joke, I guess, that goes, my wife told me I lack empathy. I don't know how she could feel that way. But I think it's a theme here that's pretty consistent. Putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, understanding where they're coming from, what their unique needs are, and trying to collect that information and understand it, and then put it back is really what helps create corporate culture to begin with. We at Globant, here's a shameless pitch for a second, but it actually brought me to the company. We have a system, it's called Star Me Up. And the entire point of the system, it's just a social media system internal that allows me, when somebody does something great or I see some amazing accomplishment or they just helped me, I give them a star. Yeah. And the first time that I got one, I said, oh, that's a neat thing, and I heard about it. And the first time I got one, I was like, yeah, I got a star. I'm really excited about it. And it's a whole social currency within the system, but it creates a little bit more of that esprit de corps. And then when you look at the data underneath it, what you notice is the people that have the most connections in the system have given or received the most stars, highest retention rate. In fact, 35% better than those that are not engaged fully. So, again, listening, respecting, and trusting, I think, is what's going to really take us out of that great resignation into, the great long-term retirement.
Thank you all to the panelists. Great job. Really appreciate it.
For more information, please visit hmgstrategy.com and keep up to date by following us on our social media platforms. Thank you.